Hey everyone, and welcome to the Domain Social for, I forget now, November 20th, 2020. For those of you joining us on YouTube, feel free to go to thedomainsocial.com and subscribe there to get Zoom access to future episodes. And on that note, I am a little tired today, so I won't ramble anymore, and we'll just get to talking about domains. So, what's up with everybody? Who's done what this week in domains? Don't all of you talk at the same time. Anybody sell anything? Anybody have any interesting stories at all?
Well, so this is actually really big news, and it was announced yesterday. Donuts bought Afilias, and that's a big title change. That's very large companies coming together. Afilias runs the back end and has been involved since the turn of the century on TLDs. So they run info and Moby, and they're the back end for .org. They operate a ton of ccTLDs, including .io, and having them acquired by Donuts turns Donuts into a pretty big powerhouse. So that's a big thing. How that affects us remains to be seen.
It's less competition, right?
Prices will go up, but that's what's going to affect us.
Yeah.
That's usually what it means.
Yeah, it's consolidation. It's I was joking. I think I was talking with you, Johnson. I was joking, saying it's only a matter of time before GoDaddy owns VeriSign, and it's like it's all over. and then
that'll go one direction or the other.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then 2 years after that, they're going to figure out a way to buy ICANN and just, whatever.
So, Jonathan, is this just a part of the new TLD shakedown, or what do you think this is?
Well, it depends on what you call new. I mean,
Shakeout,
info was new, I guess, in contrast to the legacy TLDs like ComNet or GovInfo, or info is a newer one. But they run the back end for .org. So, I mean, it's the same. Are we recording right now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll talk about it a little bit on the unrecorded segment, but if you recall, there was an effort to acquire .org by Ethos Capital, which seemed to have some connections to the parent company of Donuts. So now this effectively brings the back end of .org under that same ownership. So was it a roundabout way to get there that had all kinds of extra benefits? Who knows? Anyway, it's two private companies changing hands. Each of the companies have some exceptional people working there who, I've gotten to know across the span of a couple decades. They're really, really incredible people. It's not, this is all the non-com stuff. So it's a big consolidation in non-com TLDs. That'll be really interesting. But, both Donuts and the people at Afilias have really done a lot of innovation stuff. I think a lot of you heard me talk on Drew Rosner's Domain Sherpa, and you hear me rambling on here a lot about how I think domains are just websites and just email are just barely scratching the surface of what you can do with domains. So it's my hope this actually gives way to all kinds of new innovation and things that are going to make domains even that much more valuable. Is my belief here. So it's a good thing to see these companies come together. But I also, putting on my conference hat, or even on on RF's behalf for this, the more consolidation that occurs, the fewer sponsors there are for events, the fewer sponsors there are for all kinds of different initiatives and things like that. And it also, inevitably, anytime there's an acquisition, there's always some asshole behind a spreadsheet who looks at the company through purely who do we fire because we can make this one person do two jobs kind of thing. Where are there efficiencies that you can gain? So, at a time when there's a global pandemic and joblessness and blah, blah, blah going on, that floods a job resource market with a lot of candidates to compete with. If you're, somebody working in the space, it's not necessarily good for that, perspective. But All that said, let's think about it from the perspective of each of you as far as domain, what you do with domains. How many of you own a domain that Afilias is the backend for? Like you probably own an info, an org, or a Mobi. You probably may own a .io. And then, Donuts has a large number of domains. They've got the like 200 of the new TLDs. They purchased, I think, .travel as one of the 2005 round domains. And they're still out acquiring domains. So this consolidates, as far as registries go, this consolidates. So there's, VeriSign, there's GoDaddy Newstar, there's Donuts Afilias, then there's CentralNIC, which is a whole series of, it's the back end for a bunch of the providers like XYZ, who have been acquiring a bunch of TLDs. CentralNIC themselves have been working on the back end for CCTLDs and GTLDs. So we're starting to see companies, we're starting to see the natural consolidation inside the space, is what I'd say.
Yeah. I don't.
Yeah, but Jonathan, I hear what you're saying, and you did a good job of framing it for a public audience. And you've seen both of these companies come from nowhere, from a group of 20 registrars gathering to form something in round one that became Afilias and everything. But I guess I'm less likely to think that anything innovative or cost reducing for the general public or better for the domain name space in general will come from this at all. Because I think we've seen Donuts apply a numbers game methodology to marketing their TLDs, which is that if you have enough of them, there will always be some interest in the top select few. And then at the same point, I think that the history of the ICANN people that have moved into private equity, that have moved into buying all this stuff, I just see it as same old, which is that they're doing what they should do. We have an amazing industry that produces an amazing amount of cash flow that's incredibly valuable to private equity. But as someone in the industry, I don't certainly think at all that this is going to somehow improve anything. I think it's going to just make everything look more like the status quo. And that was my first thought when I heard about this.
Well, I got a question I have about that is, what are the pricing models of Donuts versus Afilias in terms of premium domains? Well, like premium tier price domains. Does Donuts, are most of their domains priced where they're the domainer and Afilias not so much? Or like, could that model be changing? Could we start seeing premiums on like, I don't think .io has, Afilias has .io, right?
Afilias runs Afilias, as I understand it, is the registry operator for .io, but I don't think they are the equity owner making the decision. Jonathan, do you know more than I do?
.org isn't really Afilias. It's the internet. What is it?
Jonathan, on .io, is there a .io owner, for lack of a better word, marketing owner?
I'd have to research to answer that.
Yeah.
From what I understand, it is an entity called ICB, and I think Afilias owns ICB, but we can double check that.
Okay.
So if your question is, Afilias has not always gone the Donuts route of having high premium renewals.
Okay.
At the same point, Donuts has been willing to sell names for one-off prices too. It's once they get you on the phone, everything's available.
Yeah. So basically
everything's available. But I know that if you look at some of the work recently this year that the guys running the Afilias premium names have done, they've moved a lot of great names, and I think that they were bringing energy to .global, to some of the other ones, the old .infos that came out and stuff. And I think that was good. I hope that continues as opposed to,
Well, yeah, but it's just that what we don't necessarily want as us as domainers to be squeezed out of being the middleman, right? That's with
well, the way
.com.
that you are squeezed out because
Yeah.
Donuts and now Afilias, they have unlimited supply.
Yeah.
So imagine you're a store and the store next to you has unlimited supply with no cost. So they can always, even if their product isn't as good as yours, they can always price it down to zero to get market share if things ever got tough. So I would say that yes, this makes a even stronger competitor that has the ability to undercut us all because they have no cost in their inventory.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to know. Yeah, because it's funny because the whole point of these of the new gTLDs, in theory, originally was create more competition. But ultimately, if they all have, like, they're supposed to be generics, right? But most of them have like a defined usage. And so there isn't much competition between them. Like, I mean, there's no competition between like a .lawyer and a .doctor because like a lawyer cannot use .doctor. I mean, they could technically.
Right,
But, I mean,
but the competition was supposed to happen at the registry level and the cost of operating. And that's that's what hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And that's where the competition was supposed to benefit the public was that the hard cost of running a registry is fractions of even, you know, what the wholesale price is. And we were supposed to see something revert more toward that, and we never did.
Yeah. Oh, well. Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts on that, Joseph?
About costs and competition, by the way, have you noticed what GoDaddy did with the Discount Domain Club last week?
No. What?
They just doubled the price.
Yeah, that
No.
sucks.
For
Yes,
what?
they did.
To almost
Yeah.
200?
Wow.
234.
Exactly.
234.
No way.
Yep.
So they doubled it, but they did clarify in Name Pros that anybody who's currently a member would be renewed at the same price and be grandfathered in.
Huh.
I'll try to
Oh.
find that thread and post it.
That's
Yeah.
good stuff, Anthony. That's good
Thanks,
stuff
Anthony.
right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Really good.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking of moving my domains now, and I have hundreds of them at GoDaddy to Namecheap. So I guess I might hesitate to do that not now if they can grandfather us in.
I had a pretty nice sale a couple weeks ago, and I got the funds through PayPal. And so, without getting details, we already talked about this before, but there's a certain registrar who's currently having difficulty with PayPal. And so I had some domains there. I'm like, okay, I want to use this money to renew. And being in Canada, if I convert to my bank account via PayPal, I can't even if I have a US dollar bank account, PayPal will not send money to somebody in Canada in US funds. It has to be Canadian funds. So if I transfer it to my Canadian account and then put it in my credit card and pay my credit card, I'm essentially paying twice the exchange fee. So I go to myself, okay, what's going on right now in terms of promos? Namecheap they had their transfer week or something like that. So I think I paid $688 or something like that. And for, you know, a couple hundred domains that I moved there. And then after moving there, a couple hundred domains, I go to, to extract my list, to download my list. So I put it into my database and at Namecheap, you can't download your inventory. You have to go through support to get just the listing of your domains. It's like, what? You know, like, I mean, it was fairly prompt. You know, their service was good. The chat service, it was, you know, I used it a few times. I had a few other technical issues, but it was just like, how can a registrar not enable you to download your own inventory of domains? It's just, it was really weird. So, you know, I often complain about some registrars sometimes, but that just boggled my mind. I was like, I felt bad. Like, I'm going to chat the support, and I go, I feel really stupid because it should be obvious. I was like, not only do you don't have an option to download your inventory, your portfolio, but they don't even show you how many domains you currently have at the registrar. So you can't check on on the fly to say, okay, I know I have 200 domains there. You can't check to make sure that this 200 are still there. It's just really weird. Anyhow, that was my thoughts on some Namecheap. I had to share it, but the support was very friendly and pretty good. So that's that. Yeah. So what else with everybody? What's going on?
I've got 3 names in escrow with Afternic, so that's a happy thing this week. It's been a little slow other than that.
Congrats.
That's well done.
2 of them were the same keyword, and it ended up being the same person when I went and looked at one was a fast transfer, one wasn't a fast transfer, but it was the same people. And I kind of hoped that the other Jason would hang around here and talk about, because I know he's marketed to people who have bought names, marketed other names to them. And most of the time, I don't necessarily think that's a feasible thing. But if somebody bought 2 of my names, then they're looking for that keyword, and I have other names with that keyword. So one was a US, one was a .us. I mean, it was a low 3-figure sale, and the other one was about $5,000 was a .com, but they were the same. The one keyword was the same keyword.
Mike, if you share that keyword, we all can call him too.
Well, that's kind of what I figured, Kevin. And, so I was waiting for you to log off so I could tell everyone else except you.
I'll do that right now. Hold on.
I'm sure you will.
That's good. I mean, for the rest of you, do you guys find as in previous years, as you approach year end, you got that last minute wave of people looking to make purchases before the end of the tax year?
Well, like Christmas gifts or
tax year. I mean, people like companies are looking. They have to make their expenses before the end of the year. They have a certain budget. They want to, it's like they got to use it before the end of the year. I always thought that the last few weeks of December would have a little rush for that reason. I've got decent volume, but not enough to notice that.
I mean, I've gotten a few offers, but I mean, they're too small for my taste, so I haven't even mentioned that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's possible, but not like last year or the year before. I mean, I've had some good sales in November and December in the years before, but I haven't really. I mean, I can't smell it. I can't see that something is going to happen unless something does happen in the next couple of weeks.
But in previous years, you've noticed a bump at the end of the last year? Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, they have a certain budget for the year, and if they don't use it up, I mean, it doesn't transfer over to the next year. It just vanishes, and so they say, okay, we got so much marketing funds available, and let's use it and acquire a name. Maybe they're doing something else. I don't know.
Yeah. What about on the other end of it? Anybody here buy domains before the end of the year, specifically to sort of write off some taxes?
I used to.
Yeah.
When I was more of an acquisition, for just registration fee domains, yeah, it'd be December 30th, 31st. Might as well get those in there, yeah, and use it that way.
Yeah. Okay.
I also used, last year we didn't close the deal. It was a higher dollar than normal. I actually did say, tell somebody that I'd rather close it after the end of the year, rather than get the money right away. And we were talking in November or December. So just for tax purposes, I'd rather not even, get the funds for it. It didn't end up closing, but that was part of my discussion.
Mike, I'll take it as soon as they'll give it to me.
Well, it was sort of a negotiating thing too. I thought, that way I don't seem too desperate. Yeah, I'll take it today.
Right.
It's like, well, it wasn't going to close right away anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got some action going on. Last week was really the week after the election got called. It was a really busy week for me, and now I'm kind of closing out. I already closed one trying to close out another, and yeah, it's a little bit more action I find, but hopefully it'll hold. I think we're in for a long winter, but I think also lights at the end of the tunnel too. So, you know, I think this time next year, I think we'll all be good, and we'll see what's going on. But I think a lot of businesses are changed forever, right? People are curious how many of these new businesses will continue on after, you know, like not the big ones, but I mean like people who started their own little side businesses. Just curious to see how things will change this time next year.
It will change.
I would say.
a lot of things.
Oh, go ahead.
Go, Anthony.
I was just gonna say, I would say, so I don't have any closes last week, but I do have a bigger pipeline. I've had some really good conversations with people. I'm doing a lot of outbound, and nobody's blowing me off or F-bombing me yet, knock on wood. So I'm gonna keep doing my thing.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have lots of conversations and people thinking about domains. Whereas, you know, in my estimation, if you're not doing outbound, and you just have fewer people looking at your names. I mean, granted, if you're pushing them to them, you're not going to get top dollar, but I would say, like many, I have a wide range of names, those which I would hold out for, and those that I'd flip for $300 because I paid $8 for it, you know?
Yeah. If you're outbounding, the math works out. If you're not outbounding and your sell-through rate is low, then $300 does not make any sense. But if you're outbounding,
right,
and your sell-through rate is decent, it's great. And that's why, like, the domaining, there's so many models. There's so many business models you could use that are potentially successful. You know, there's many more that are potentially disastrous, but that's more in tune with the quality of domains you get, right? So, and there's some people that you know don't succeed, but it's part of it is because of their pricing, but most of it is just because so many new people just get domains that will just never sell at any price. So
I tell you, that to me, that's one of the most painful things to see is when somebody says, "Hey, I need help selling my domains," and you see this list of domains that just like the best course of action is like, go sign up for DN Academy, don't renew those, and you know, start over. But that's tough. Those are tough conversations to have.
Yeah, there was a few weeks, a while ago, maybe 2 months ago. I mentioned it here a couple of times when I was just burnt. I in that week I'd gotten like 5 emails or messages on name pros from different people, and it was all like domains that were just zero value. I'm like, oh, I was so like disheveled. I was so felt so bad for them. Like, you know, how do you tell somebody that like, no, this business isn't for you? Like, I mean, there were domains that were just so bad. It's like how did you, like, you know, there's some people who start off who get domains that are borderline, or like you tell them something and they get it, but these were just domains that were just like so far beyond anything. It was like, oh, just felt.
You mean like a 2-word .life domain that somebody tried to pitch me?
Or a 3-word .life with a hyphen, you know, and a zero. You know?
and this one was $50,000 and it couldn't be justified in any way, and I just like I couldn't even respond. So
yeah. Oh, wow. All right. So what's up with everybody else? I'm tired of talking. What's going on with everybody else? I had a very busy week. So somebody tell me something about domains. Let's go. Anything.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
Anybody have what they call a domain will here?
Yeah, we talked about this after hours a couple weeks ago. No, I don't. Well, no, I don't.
Nobody?
I think many people don't. There was a company, but they kind of stopped doing it a couple of years ago.
Domain Guardians. That was Domain Guardians.
Yeah, they went out of business. Well, I had a discussion. I asked Adam Strong about it because Adam seems to have founded almost every company in the industry. And I think they just said there just wasn't enough business. They're just people, they didn't have enough people that were interested. You know, so when you say domain will, Kevin, you brought that up, right?
Yeah.
So I just have some instructions for my wife on where my domains are, and it's just treated like an asset, just like any other assets in our trust. Do you mean like something specific, like the domains are called out like your classic car is or something like that in your will?
No, I mean something like, like if something, I have no kids or anything, but I got brothers, and my wife, she knows what I do, but
yeah,
something that says, hey, I got all these domains, here's all my passwords, this is what, these are okay, these are so, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. Just don't let them expire, and let all you guys find them in the expiry list. So I just didn't know if somebody had something like that, some kind of gist paper, or just kind of something written out that was, kind of explained, you should do this and you should do that.
Sounds like a great packet for DN Academy to put together, huh?
There you go. Sounds good. Well, it'd be good to have a variety of contact names too, so that if it's just a husband and wife, the husband domainer passes away, the wife can contact an experienced domainer that the husband trusted to help sell the names if she wasn't going to hang on to the portfolio.
Right.
Yeah.
So a named executor, I guess you would call them, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We've talked about that. My wife knows who to contact and everything, but what if we both kind of whatever, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden there's this whole portfolio sitting here that my brothers wouldn't know what to do with them. They wouldn't have an idea what a domain is.
They probably wouldn't even know you had them.
They know I have them, but they don't know. They don't know.
But I mean, a lot of people
18th century.
So a lot of people like a lot of people started domaining like myself on the side, right? So like there's many people in my life who have no clue I do domaining on the side. It's right. Like, so that in itself is a problem. But
well, and then you got to throw in on top of that, these domains look like they're worthless when people don't have an understanding of them, and then they're shocked that it could be like a $300,000 domain name.
Yeah.
Right, Joseph? And so, do not let that expire.
So I bought my daughter a membership to DN Academy, and I'm going to leave my business to her. It's not all in paperwork yet, but that was my solution. I don't think she's been on there much yet, but she's got a lifetime membership. So, and she's kind of the obvious person in my family because she's already into tech stuff. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thanks for that, Leonard.
Yeah, I kind of like made a separate file on my spreadsheet where these are, 4 stars, these are 3 stars, these are whatever. Accordingly, don't let these go and everything. But until someone knows what those notations are, that's just a bunch of notations on a spreadsheet.
I think ultimately, probably one of the most, realistic solutions is like, look what we're doing right now, right? We're social. There's probably, this is a bigger group. I know some people have smaller groups they meet with sometimes, and there's certain people you connect with more. And I think ultimately that was probably the right solution, is just have somebody where you have an agreement where it's like, if you pass first, then you take care of my stuff. If I pass first, I take care of your stuff and pass on the money to whoever's the person that in your life. For me would be my mom and Steamy, but I mean, because we're all domainers, right? So a lot of us are procrastinators in a lot of stuff, and it's, you put your will on to the next day, but it doesn't take much to reach out to somebody you trust and say, look, if this happens, that, this is what you need to do, or this is, you tell your wife or your loved one, if I pass away, contact this person, and then that person can walk the other person through it all. I think that's, probably the
but like a lot of times in expired names, who let this drop? Why would you let this drop? Why would somebody let it? That could just be what happened. Somebody just died and nobody knows anything about him or anything. Like what happened with Mrs. Jello. Boom, all of a sudden his names are all of a sudden appearing in all the expiry lists. And he would have lost that if other domainers hadn't came back to his family and said, hey, these names are good. You need to get them. So.
Exactly. Very good point, Kevin. In fact, I was just reading up on that Mrs. Jello or Igal Lichtman, Magic Solutions. That's really a case study for us to look over. And I think there are a lot of lessons. And if somebody that you're thinking of as being the person that would take over, if you will, or be the person that would then take that further is reluctant to even hear about that, you should have them read up on the life of Mrs. Jello. And I think they might be saying, yeah, I think I really should be an executor of that, and they'll take you seriously. So that's a good point, Kevin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what, made me think of right away when you mentioned that.
You just never know. I mean,
Hey guys, I think we have a lot more to worry about now than we ever did before. And I think one of the main things that you have to kind of factor into your estate planning, and this sounds dumb, is your phone, access to your phone, because of the increased use of two-factor.
Oh, yeah.
That not only is having a username and password going to be important, but someone almost has to be able to access a trusted device to do confirming and things like that in a way that probably didn't exist 5 years ago.
Yeah. I told that exact thing to my wife, Paige, that if I, God forbid, pass away, she knows how to get in my computer, and we have a 1Password, and she knows all my passwords that way, but do not let my phone, expire or go out of service, because you'll need to agree to all those two-factor authentications or sign-ins or whatever. Yeah. Getting into Gmail, oftentimes they'll send you that confirmation via their own app.
And I don't think when they designed all that, they thought about repercussions like that. I mean, they just said, here's how it's going to work for us. So I think that's important. Access to your email and your phone now is really a big deal.
I actually had someone call me because I had their old number in order to help them out with the two-factor authentication. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, my 13-year-old son just got a new phone, and he's getting confirmation text messages from, nothing like that, but like the power company, saying there's an outage in the area. I'm like, I know there's an outage, but but yeah, it's funny how they don't put those phone numbers into some sort of longer stream for expiration.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think about having a list? So for example, Mrs. Eagle, right, does she share her list of domains with a domainer community so that everybody else can broker her names? Like some of us have some pretty valuable names, other ones don't. So like maybe have some, group input. So like let's create a group where we have, if something happens to one of us, we'll share our list on, not named Liquidate, but something similar to that, where we all have access to that list. We can all do outbounding on it. We can find, act as brokers, basically.
I think the ultimate issue with that is who would have final authority, and who would make the judgment call whether an offer is enough or not.
The executor.
Yeah, but you would need an executor who knows domains, right?
Right. Well, the executor will have it'll have a list. Like for example, your list, you'll have like values that you like a range that you'd sell these domains for, and also group input would say, hey, that domain is only worth $2,000. It's not a $100,000 domain.
Yeah, because that's the issue too. Is if you're liquidating, it's worth one amount, and if you're looking for optimal value, it's a different thing.
Right. Well, we're not talking about liquidating. We're talking about brokering.
Yeah.
Type of thing. But we're not acting as like a regular brokerage. But like, for example, Mike said, oh, I have this keyword that's really popular, well, maybe one of us also has that same keyword, right? And then we'll just like look at the list, like, oh, here's a master list of, Arif's domains, and let's take care of him, like take care of his mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously you get 20% for the sale or whatever, but at least it's something more than she'd get.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think there's a happy way for any of that to ever end.
It's just there's a lot of management involved. It's one of these things that are great on when we discuss it on paper, but when it just becomes a lot of time.
What's a typical fee for managing? If someone has a big enough portfolio, an executor might appoint someone to manage it. And do they make their money on as a percentage of sales, or is there a percentage of the portfolio value that they get paid? I think
executors get paid
do that,
initially.
I think
it goes by state law or provincial law. So, like, for example, in Ontario, I think it's 3% of the estate. So the executor wants to realize the value of the estate within 1 year, and that's generally what they try to do.
And I'm not talking about the executor. I'm saying in this instance, the executor might appoint a domain manager.
Right.
So that executor may not know much about domains, but they may hire somebody to act on behalf of the estate to, administer it. And it may be a big enough portfolio. You don't want to wholesale it. It'll take years. And so what's a reasonable, like Jason, I think, don't you manage some domains? And I think Paige, in the comments, you said you named some people. How would they be compensated, you think?
Hey, I feel as a moderator to intervene. In the past, when we've talked about things, it's amazing how he does this. It's almost like saying Beetlejuice 3 times. I see that Stephen Lieberman is here. I know that you represented
last time
all in defense of a name recently. I wonder if you might have some words you could share.
About when people, I just heard the very end about when people die or there's issues.
We got to figure out how you do this. How is it that you just show up like that in the most opportune moment? It's amazing.
Somebody says my name 3 times.
That could be. Well, in this case, they said Miss Jello a few times. I wonder if you like channeling Igal. But so we're talking about, like, when you pass away, who's created sort of continuity. We talked a little bit about domain guardians, and Mike Seiger mentioned some of the things that he's doing to show his wife. A few of us, Kevin has talked a little bit about, like, here's what you do or here's what you don't. But there's some gaps there. And having worked with, in defense of Igal's names a number of times, what are some things that people as domain investors can do for this type of continuity? Whether it's working with a living trust, coming together with a checklist of things that they can do, in the event of a sudden loss of cabin pressure, what happens to my domains?
We've actually done this for a whole bunch of different clients. Most people set up trusts. That's the majority of the solution. And then the intelligent people that I've come across have named not 1, not 2, but 3, 4, or 5 different friends that they know in the industry to assist with dealing with different parts and assigning one person to sort of manage the overall. Because if you have a lot of names, it obviously can get really complicated and an awful lot of work. And basically, they've basically said, I'm assigning these people, and whoever helps with the particular domain names, I'm treating them essentially as a broker and giving them either 15 or 20%. Because they're essentially doing the work of a broker. They're maintaining the domain names as an extra. But the important part is continuing to make sure the domain names are sold and managed correctly. A number of people have turned around and said, and in fact, one of my clients just the other day put his son as co-owner of all the domain names by putting his son in as an owner, a 1% owner of the company. And in his will, the business transfers to his son, and because it's between parent and child, it automatically, there's not going to be any cost from that point of view. But if you can't convince your son, like he did, to actually sit down and learn the business, he sort of forced his son to spend some time every day for about 3 months to learn the basics. Then you have to assign people who actually know something in the industry, because although it looks easy to us, it's really not that easy knowing how to maintain domain names and sell them and manage portfolios, especially large portfolios. The client I was just talking about, he's got 22,000 domain names, and just the mass of domain names, figuring out what you're doing, you could lose your shirt really, really fast. One lady I know who she actually sat down and wrote herself basically a manual for her best friend on how to react in each different situation that she sees. she's got some really good domain names, so it's going to be very easy for them to be sold. But she doesn't want the money wasted, and she wants the money going to her grandkids. So there's a lot of different options. There's two different types of trusts also. What?
Hey, Steve, it's Paige.
Hey, Paige, how are you?
How you doing, man? I feel like we probably talked about this. Hey,
We have.
Has any of the our domains property, or is it a guaranteed right to renew that could kind of almost pass outside probate, kind of, sort of? Has that ever come up as to whether it's property and an asset and all that stuff? Just
Well,
talking,
I've had
just
that,
talking. Yeah.
I've had that actual discussion with people from VeriSign just recently, and we just tried to do a domain seizure in Virginia and failed because of the statutory and legal framework in Virginia. On the other hand, we've done it in California successfully because it's a very different framework. So the basic framework is, and this is sort of generally, on the East Coast, domain names are the subject of a contract. And you can assign the rights to a contract, as all of you know, but you have to do it in a contract. You have to assign it, and the assignor has to, the person that's the third party of the contract has to accept it. You can transfer rights, obviously, internal to the contract by setting up a new contract, and VeriSign and all the other registrars sort of accept that. On the West Coast, on the other hand, domain names are a fungible right. And just like a car or a horse, it's really easy to transfer those rights, and it's in many ways a much more logical way to go. On the other hand, the IRS has specifically deemed domain names to be intellectual property because they get more taxes that way. And everyone's actually doing this.
You notice that?
I do notice that. VeriSign wants domain names to be the subject of a contract because that puts them in the best position and they make the most money from it from that point of view. You know, it all seems to come down to money and rights and thinking ahead. If you think ahead, you could always design something to allow control by other people and to deal with the situation no matter what happens. If you're just walking down the street and you haven't thought it through and written something down, you get hit by a bus, shit can really hit the fan. I mean,
because registrars, Stephen, registrars, and Jonathan, maybe you too, registrars are risk averse, right? They never want to make a decision. And so if someone calls and says, I'm next of kin, I want to get access to this account, they've got to run from that type of discussion.
They want to be responsible.
You know, just as fast as they can. They need something to hang their hat on. Is that about what, you know?
The only thing you're going to do in that case is get letters probate. That is the only thing they're going to actually get, that where they legally have to give you the same rights as that of the deceased. And I can tell you, I've done letters probate. It's a royal pain in the ass.
Especially if you have to renew stuff in the interim.
Right. No, I mean, it could take time. We did one point 5-6 years ago, end up having to do an emergency motion for letters probate to get it done fast. Because I can tell you right now, the courts are slower than they've ever been. And getting letters probate could take a couple of months. Easy, especially if someone dies intestate. That's
so it's
without
really
a will.
the possession of that login information that is the thing that's the most important thing, because that is in essence ownership of the name, is possession of that login.
Well, you ever hear the phrase 9/10 of the law is possession is 9/10 of the law? It's not really true. Because we do lots of domain theft cases and get possession back. But yeah, in reality, if you have the login, nobody's ever going to say anything.
Because you need that to renew. The key is to renew, not let anything drop for those pesky expired domain names purchases to buy up.
Well, I'll give you something, Paige, that you'll probably like. We were in the middle of litigation at one point, and the domain names that we were litigating over were all getting ready to drop. And we were able to force the registrar into accepting money, even though we had no ownership rights whatsoever, to renew the domain names.
Gotcha.
So renewal and ownership really aren't the same thing. There may be part of that bundle of rights,
Right.
but they're really not the same thing. And nobody should actually rely on, I mean, what happens if you lose the password? What if it's one of these registrars that force you to change the password, you know, once a year, and there are a few of them. And then you're in a position and you're like, oh, I have to change the password, but I don't really know the password. And and I can't do two-factor authentication because my friend who died cell phone is no longer working or something like that.
Right. Or they shifted the number to somewhere else. And you know, that's one thing with two-factor authentication, you know, loss of a phone, stolen phone. I don't know how many of you have had to go through. I love all the security that it's like something that you have that somebody can't forge to get into your stuff. But when you're the right person, being able to get in at that, it's frustrating. And, you know, throw in probate and all the other stuff, that is layers of complexity.
This question, the answer will be different on a state-by-state basis.
Yeah. And that's always one warning I put out in a previous, I think it was the Halloween one when we talked about some taxation stuff, whereas people have to know that when it comes to the law and to taxation, every country, state, jurisdiction is different. What a professional could recommend and be great advice in one place might be illegal in another place. So always bear that in mind and consult with a lawyer if it's something important, and a lawyer that knows where you live, you know, where it was pertinent to where you are. Stephen, where are you located?
I'm in Washington, D.C., Maryland.
Okay, Maryland.
I mean,
so a lot of companies, yeah.
The reality is a probate attorney, someone who does wills, trusts, and estates, is the right type of attorney to do this. Setting up a trust isn't that hard, but setting up a trust correctly that takes an advantage of all the tax benefits that you can get from it, and deals with all the different little intricacies of this stuff, that attorney may not understand domain names and may not understand, you know, how to access registrars. But that's something you can tell somebody relatively easily. Understanding the intricacies of tax law and probate and how to set up a trust and wills correctly, well, that stuff's really complicated, and it's real different from a state-by-state basis. And it's real different. A friend of mine is a UK attorney, and he tells me stuff, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like, yeah, it does. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm up here in Canada, and I know there's a lot of us here from Canada, but I mean, you know, most people here I think are from the US. Maybe not 50%, but around there. But there's many of us who are other places where it's like even the terms are different terms. You know, it's like
Well, where are people from? I know we got US and Canada. What other countries we got?
When we start a little bit earlier, we got quite a few UK.
Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Okay.
That depends on how much you're drinking, doesn't it?
So Joseph is from Turkey. I think Frank's here from Estonia.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Canadians.
Okay.
Gunner's here from Sweden. I see we've got Zekel is from Argentina. We have a few people here from India. Declan's from England. I see these rotating in the chat. I'm not that smart to remember all this stuff. A lot of Midwest. I see quite a few people here from the Midwest. There's a few of us from Seattle. Woo-hoo! Right, Mike? Woo!
LA, yo.
LA, yeah. So we're all over the place. You know, I wanted to comment, you know, I think Mike Sager, I think originally started sort of the gravitational pull that we've all circulated on this. Stephen, you mentioned tax. I have just been delighted with a domain owner's tax guide. I forget what the specific term is that came as, and it's there in all the resources with DN Academy. That was the most valuable thing, because I started to talk to my domain portfolio with the person who prepares my taxes, and they were like, it was like I was describing everything in a foreign language to them, and they just had this like look on their face, like what the what? And I was able to buy a copy of that for them, And Michael, I can't give you enough digital COVID hugs here on Zoom for that. I mean, it's fantastic.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Are you going to add anything like probate or obviously here I hear an appetite, but if you were expanding out DN Academy and wanted to head into this, I don't want to be blocking any kind of expansion of material, just out of respect for what you've established here in kicking off this group.
I appreciate that. I'll tell you, if Mike G decides to join DN Academy, I will launch that lesson. I'm just joking. We were chatting. It's on our roadmap. I think there was a NamesCon. It was either at Pages or at NamesCon. Somebody had a talk about wills and planning for what happens after life. And Aline Carrier, who's our teaching assistant at DN Academy, attended that session, and it's on our roadmap to develop a lesson. So we have some input on information that's necessary, and I've gone down that route, exactly what Stephen Lieberman has mentioned, creating a trust, providing a listing of resources that the executor of your trust is going to need at some point. So yeah, it's on our roadmap. I don't feel like you're stepping on my toes at all by going and doing a separate session. I would love to attend that. I'm sure I'll pick up some other tidbits along the way as well. And, I think the more the merrier when it comes to putting out content and allowing people to think critically about what they need to do.
Cool.
Yeah, especially because it's going to be different on an individual by individual basis.
Yeah.
What you want is not going to be the same as what Frakes want. We're different people. We have different priorities. Some people have kids, some people have grandkids, all the rest.
Right. And I can tell you, after our attorney drew up our trust papers, I think it took us like 3 years to actually sign it, and we had to go back and revisit everything to make sure that it didn't change before we signed it.
I think you should revisit it regularly. Actually.
I know it's the kind of topic that nobody ever wants to talk about because who's gonna get our kids? Who's gonna get our assets? How much are they gonna get to pay for the kids? And every one of our domain names is a kid. And so, nobody ever wants to talk about it. Planning it is like pulling teeth. And then, Stephen, I'm just so glad we got it signed. I don't want to go back and revisit it.
Well, I hate to tell you this, and I know you're going to be shocked about this, but your kids are going to grow up. and at one point they may hate you. They may say, "Oh no, you can't tell me what to do." and you may want to make one of them the trustee at some point when they come around at 35 or so and are actually have a brain again.
The one that loves me the best gets pyramid.com. That's all.
Perfect. See?
Adopt me, Mike.
Oh my goodness. Wonderful. Well, so, Stephen, you popped up at an interesting time because yes, we were talking about just, taking it over and managing so they don't drop and, where they're used and things like that. But also you've had to defend Miss Jello a number of times. So coming up with something not only that is continuity for operations, but maybe continuity for, ensuring against threats and things like that to manage it.
So I can tell you with a lot of our clients, probably 8 or 9 different clients, we hold, although we're not the executors for the will and we haven't written up the wills, we hold copies of the wills and access to the passwords to the domain names because the attorneys look at that have done the probate work, look at it and they're like, we're not dealing with domain names. Go away. And so they sort of designated us to help the attorneys to deal with, and whoever is the trustee to deal with the domain names. Just, you don't know who's going to be around at the time.
Well, and it's complex. Describing domains to people who don't work with them all the time is still really, really challenging. You may as well be describing, moon dust or
a big roadblock or obstacle or something that could really throw a monkey wrench into it is that there are ongoing costs on domains. Like if somebody dies and I have my old comic book collection, well, they can just sit there until they're sold, right? But domains, if your portfolio is a mediocre one, you might be net negative as you progress trying to liquidate them, so that could be an issue too. Where do they get the extra money from if it goes into negative? That's
well, and registry price increases and things like that. How do you plan for inflation? So those are some interesting topics. So when we go back through and set this up, we'll remember these. We'll listen to the recording and kind of document them, and maybe take some questions from people along the way. Let's pull that toaster out of the bathtub here and kind of back up and talk about something maybe positive or happy, right? Does anybody have some sales for the week? We've had a lot of
Can we talk about something else first? Donuts.
Oh, we did. We covered that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But that's amazing.
You have anything to add on that? The acquisition.
The acquisition.
Yeah.
How is that going to? That's going to change things, isn't it?
Well, it's two big companies, right? It's too big.
So Stephen, there's a theory. There's a theory being posed that it's the same acquiring company that was interested, like with the Ethos Capital acquisition of .org, and this is an acquisition of the back end. So is it sort of a roundabout way of accomplishing the same objective? That's the theory that I'm hearing. But there's always some kind of black helicopter theories floating around inside of alternative perspectives on
that seems to go against. I thought the registry contract for org really got knocked down to size. That's the way they even described it in the press release, that the org registry contract became not as attractive for Afilias. So
I'm not saying it's my idea or my thought. I don't think that. But I hear that, and I guess somebody could come to that conclusion, but I don't know that I agree with you. I think that it's pretty protected, but the net is that they are the back end for .org now.
Do we know what they're charging per unit?
For which unit? For orgs?
For .orgs, yeah. What Afilias is charging the internet? I always forget what they're called. The internet.
It's the ISOC. It's Internet Society.
Internet Society. That's it. Yeah.
It is likely public. I might know the wholesale price, but until I'm 100% certain it's public, I can't say.
Do you know?
But it's below $11, I believe.
Okay,
that's all that I can say.
ISOC charges, but what does Afilias charge ISOC? Do you know?
I don't know if that's been publicly identified.
That would be less likely to be available information.
I'm just curious, because if they could keep the contract and they say, well, they up the cost of the management, they might then .org could use that as justification to up their prices, and say,
So I'll answer it without answering it. I think Andrew Alleman tracked the RFP process. There was a tender for the back end that a number of people replied to. I think if you look on Domain Name Wire, he may have had some insights or identifies a dollar amount that won, or some links to more information.
Yeah. Okay.
That way I'm not saying it outright.
Yeah. Okay. No, cool.
Jonathan, isn't it for a back-end registry to operate a domain name, isn't it like less than $1 per domain to operate it?
It depends who you
I know where this conversation is going to go.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong.
I've heard some very lucid arguments for that. Look, we witness promotions where people are selling names for a penny, I know that there's a per unit fee for ngTLDs to ICANN. I want to say it's 18 or 20 cents per name.
Yeah.
Registries have
there's a flat fee also.
Well, registries have it's this price up until you hit a certain volume, and then it's this much per unit that they agreed to as part of the 2012 round. I want to say it's like $25K a year. So that nets out to 25 cents a name up to 100,000 names, and then hereafter 25 cents a name.
Yeah.
So there are some real costs. The company running the registry back end same, so there's fat. You have to maintain a NIC. There's other stuff you have to do. So I'd also point towards here I am defending VeriSign charging and raising the rent on .com, but they've just celebrated something like 20 years of 100% uptime on .com. So I think we do need to look in light of what kind of infrastructure you put in place.
Every time I do it, I vent my frustrations at how there was no auction process with .com. I always also stipulate that there should be a premium awarded to VeriSign because of that very reason, because they've proven they are stable. I mean, it's just that I still feel there should be some sort of competitive process involved where, yes, you vet the company also for their stability and their ability to maintain, as close to 100% as possible. And that, yeah, if the difference is 50 cents or $1, then yeah, maybe it's worth going with VeriSign. But if the difference is between a wholesale charge of $8 versus $1.50, well then, something we got to look a little bit deeper, and that's, I think, what's really missing with the whole awarding of .com. Just here, Merry Christmas,
congratulations.
Yeah.
I mean, now they can raise prices as much as they want, and the amount of money they're making, I think they make more money than some countries, frankly.
Yeah.
They really should be, anyone who owns more than 100 domain names, they should be giving money back to us, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Because the domain industry pretty much supports them.
Yeah. Well, the really interesting number that I always look, and yeah, it's a little bit of a simple, back to napkin calculation. It's a little bit more complex than that, but VeriSign is almost all the value is on the .com, and it's for every domain they have under management, their stock price there's like $150 of their stock price that's attributed to each domain they manage. It just boggles your mind. It's like, well, so .coms are wholesaling for $8, right? Like, so their shareholders are saying there's a multiple of 20 times value of just the domains that are there, and there's no guarantee they'll stay there forever either. It's just, it boggles my mind that it's, I don't know. Anyhow, I think it's just so overpriced. It's anyhow.
No, look, I knew where that conversation was going to go. So, there are platforms for this. I mean, this isn't related to domain names. I've been looking at a variety of different blockchain projects that are related to domain names, like Unstoppable with their .zil and .crypto, and Ethereum with ENS domains. And there's one called Handshake where you can go and pick up and run your own TLD. And then there's people who aspire to make available domains within those TLDs. And there's an interest and an appetite for people with a back end there. And in fact, you can go, the namebase.io is the people who have the main site. They're kind of like the GoDaddy on that platform, for lack of a better term. And you can go there and you can get onto a waiting list, and they'll add you as a registry where people can go to encirca.com or to 101domains.com and go as third parties and register blockchain domains. I don't know what their price per unit is for the registry because they charge it in their cryptocurrency, but there are platforms out there where you can open source platforms. So you can go like, I think Google and Donuts put together something called Nomulus that's maintained as an open source project you can find. There's a platform called Coca. There's a platform called Fred. So there's a variety of registry platforms out there. If you want to explore what can you do as a registry, I think once you start to set that up and then you start to see all the extra stuff you need to go and host, it's a non-zero number, and there's a lot of requirements on what your minimum specs are and things like that. Without going too deep into it.
Are you suggesting, Jonathan, that this group should join together to create their own sort of back end of some sort and back up one or more domains or TLDs?
That's an interesting idea. So, what's the collective purchase force of this group? Right. I mean, that's kind of how Afilias fell together. It was a bunch of registrars who said, hey, let's do this. There's another one called Core. It's kind of a similar amalgamation of different entities that came together and said, hey, let's do this.
Yeah.
I mean, this group has more than enough power to do it.
Yeah, but we can't be the sheep and the wolves. Right now, we're the sheep. And if we become the wolves, then there's no other sheep out there.
Trust
where
me,
the
there's plenty of sheep.
Yeah. But no, but these new domains, I can see them being very useful. I could see people as end users saying, "Oh, I could use this in a certain way." As a domainer, a domain investor, I'm very skeptical on them because of, first of all, there will be at some point extensions that conflict with a future round 2 of the ngTLDs, and what happens when that happens. There's no guarantee that they will be able to. Well, they could keep their domains, but it's basically internet domains, and these things are not internet domains. They're internet 2 or whatever it is. So it's not just ngTLD, but it's ngTLD on something that's not necessarily approved by ICANN. And whether it should or not be approved by ICANN is a totally different argument. But the fact that it is means that, like, if I register .arif extension with one of these platforms, well, later on down the road in 10 years, if ICANN approves .arif to an official party, what happens to my domains?
Here's a good example. What's the name of that has .crypto, whatever
That's
domain?
Unstoppable Domains.
Unstoppable Domains has .crypto, right?
Right.
Then you've got Handshake, which is going to offer .crypto at some point in the future.
No, they already have. There's a different owner for that .crypto.
Then you're going to have in the next new GTLD round a .crypto, I'm sure.
Yeah,
So
and
you're going to have 3 different namespaces with .crypto, and who's going to own it?
Yeah, and the funny thing is that I've heard some arguments in that it won't be based on ICANN or this and that. Is that the argument might also be made on a trademark level? On like whoever operated it first is like, yeah, I'm using .crypto. That means you can't use .crypto. But the problem is that any extension is assumed to be, yeah, we're using .com, but it's .com.
Extensions aren't per se generic any longer. The court essentially have thrown that out, that if it's based upon, booking.com, it's based upon what the general public recognize. So if somebody goes onto the blockchain and says, we're going to set it up .rf, and .rf becomes well known for the place to go and associated with this particular company, there's a major marketing blitz, and they turn and then maybe even file for some trademarks pertaining to .rf. Then when they tried to set it up, that's a valid lawsuit against ICANN.
Yeah, that's where the whole thing is going to fall apart.
But there was a case for this called namespace versus ICANN. This is a group that had about 120 back in the 90s. They came in and applied in the 2000 round for all of them and were declined. So then, they came through and attempted to sue ICANN in the 2012 round.
But ICANN's very different now. And they didn't do substantial advertising in that case.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting someone does substantial advertising, files and obtains a bunch of trademarks in, say the US, European Union, maybe a couple of other places. And remember, ICANN's now essentially an NGO. So it is actually functionally under the thumb of the World Court. So if instead of going to the United States to file, which is what they had to do back then, instead you go and file in the World Court a trademark infringement case against ICANN, it's real doable.
So looking at what happened, there was an entity that filed and had a trademark for .eco in the 2012 round. That would try differently today, is what I think you're saying.
Yeah, it would be very different.
Yeah. Well, I put a link in the chat if somebody wants to research this stuff more. I think, Mike, you're right on the finger on the pulse on this, right? So this project, Handshake, I'm actually really following closely and looking at. I opened the issue report that I put a link to the GitHub thing on here, which in plain English is basically like where you go and file bug reports and stuff like that. And I found a bunch of TLDs that already conflict with what they set aside. What'll be interesting is, the new TLD round is not set to start for, they're still finalizing it, which could put it anywhere from on the optimistic side, 12 months to on the pessimistic side, 72 months. So they've got whatever amount of time here for people to actually start using it, right?
Yeah. And that's what's going to be the issue, is that once that's done, how long until all the legal stuff is going to get settled after that? So if there are conflicts, because that in itself is going to cause delays.
The other thing to think about this is more and more, there's a technology called DNS over HTTPS that's starting to take over from DNS itself as far as what people set to. And I think if we looked around the room, did a show of hands, a lot of you already set your DNS to quad 8 or quad 1 to get faster DNS results. More and more people are doing that. Now the browsers are actually by default given an option to use what's called a DOH provider that sends all of your DNS traffic. It encrypts it and sends it through to a provider, which is more than likely Cloudflare, Google, or NextDNS, or some of the other listed providers. I'm going very technical here, and so I'll stop in a moment. But essentially, there's nothing that says that those providers can't add TLDs. They're doing blocking right now, or they're not doing blocking to keep things from getting censored at the DNS level. But your ISP is going to be making selections for you. That provider is going to be making selections for you. And who's to say what information they do or don't share about what the activity is by each of those participants is, right? So anyway, DNS is going through some manifestations and changes. I still think it's not going to alter the basic benefit or identity of domain names, but it's very important to keep your eye on all the stuff going on so that you're protecting your assets and the value of your assets.
I think one of the other big factors on the success of these alternative domains is Chrome, right? Will there ever be a moment where they will accept these extensions without a plugin or anything like that? Because right now you can't access them, right, through Chrome.
Well, you can either
without a plugin or something.
You need some kind of helper app or activity. So you can. So I'll talk about Handshake a little bit, because it's actually kind of cool and it's worth looking at. They self-label it as an experiment, so it is what it is. I think there's close to 1 million of these TLDs have sold for a variety of prices, some better, some worse. So you can go in and you can get one of these, but you can't just use it for email or other things. They're working on the utility of it. There's a special browser called Handy Browser you can activate, and it's got a little toggle switch. So you can just turn on prioritization of their handshake names over others. So it kind of deals with that conflict stuff. You can install software like NextDNS is one of the providers. They give you a variety of options, like just setting your name servers clear through to setting up DOH or DOT, or running a proxy. And they also have a switch. You can just turn this off or on to toggle whether or not you're going to get these. So you can do it either if you have a Chrome helper app, you can have a special browser that just does it. You can set up and run something that does all your DNS in your house. Like you can configure so that your router talks to all this stuff, or your ISP upstream can do it. But they don't just work right out of the box. Yeah. And the example that I give on these is, it's almost like when you go into a hotel and you check in, there's extra channels that they have that might be like, local to the hotel. But if you go to another hotel, they're going to have different set of channels. Yeah. So whichever of these is their own sort of silo. It isn't the very first of the alternative route type of ideas. Namespace I mentioned earlier was one. There was one called new.net. Around the turn of the century. There's the Pacific Route, and a variety of others have, tried to create some gravitational mass around these. I work and have worked for the last 14 years as one of the primary volunteers on a project called the Public Suffix List. You can find out about it at publicsuffix.org. But essentially, a lot of the search engines, browsers, software use this list as what is a TLD or what do I send to search? And that commits to just talking to ICANN's root or using names that have been vetted through the IETF. So I could talk for hours on this stuff. I don't want to bore everybody with it, but if you have individual questions, I'm glad to do another session. Just like I think I put a push pin in the talk around legacy. Maybe we'll put a push pin in this so that we can talk more about the opportunities in our general day life stuff. But I'm glad to talk about this and answer questions, and I can point people in the direction of Handshake and stuff like that.
One simple question, because you said ultimately at the browser level or in your DNS settings, you're going to have to set a priority between the traditional DNS and this alternate. So there's no difference in the nomenclature. Like it's not. So if the URL is going to be .jothan, in the Handshake, just like a .com. So there will be a definite conflict that needs to be resolved with a choice browser
Correct.
level. Okay.
That's why I was also curious if there was a different legal aspect where there could be a conflict in, like, are there patents on the structure of a domain? Like, is using the structure of a domain, is that something that ICANN can go to these other new these alternatives and go, well, no, we're the ones that use this, this formatting of dot.
They
something.
can't.
No,
they can't. These structures have been out for quite some time. There were originally patents on domain names and then domain name structures, and there's actually a bunch that are pending right now. But the stuff that people have put out open source, it's open source. No one can co-opt it. We have seen some people filing for patents and then giving the patents out open source in order to prevent anyone from coming in anywhere from trying to co-opt it in any way whatsoever. But if you put something out on the market and it's out on the market for a year, you can no longer file for a patent. It's now in the public domain. That's the end of the discussion.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So I would have thought like one of the solutions would be like, instead of using .crypto, they would use like plus crypto or some other.
That's trademarks, not patents. Patents protect ideas.
Right, but I think what you're talking about, I think it's important that as we move into everything needing a plugin to make it work.
Yeah.
And yes, I don't think there's anything to stop, as long as you're going to a closed universe of people that use an extension or a plugin. I think that anyone doing Handshake or an alternate route, they obviously see the universe as them and ICANN, and they want to be number 2 to ICANN. Yeah. But they also have to look over their shoulder and see creative uses of the DNS that could be coming, like you say, not using dot, doing it in a completely different way. So I think just like the new TLDs want to look at them and .com and just see a 2-horse race, you know what I mean? That they also have to look over their shoulder at all the other new TLDs, So I think once a new root system is dependent on a plugin, like new.net was, which we used to manage the .kids for, then it does open up all kinds of rules that can be broken, because they've got some little trigger there that's going to take your navigation and turn it into something else. So yeah, if they can come up with a way to turn it into something else that would work, they could probably do it.
Yeah.
And also remember, some countries are setting up their own DNS. China's done that. Russia's doing that. I don't know if Russians are out there done or not yet.
They are ready. Russia is ready.
It is.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a big change.
Yeah.
And so those people are going to be doing the same thing in Russia. They're going to do the same thing that people do in China. They're going to have VPNs to get out of the country, and then we'll see how things go back and forth. But I don't know how they're going to set up their DNS. And I'm sure Russia would hate a blockchain DNS.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, I think we've seen, China has done what's called the Great Firewall, where they you have to have certain approvals for things to resolve, and it stands to reason that other countries could do something similar, where they create a requirement that, in order to register a domain name, you have to provide certain minimal set of information that about how you get contacted, and who's accountable for the use of that domain name or business. And there's regimes like the United States where it's possible for that to come up. It's not just talking about places like BRIC nations, like Brazil, Russia, India, or China, some of the large populous countries outside the United States. This is like, things to monitor and watch. I follow something called Internets and Jurisdiction, which is it's largely sort of policy oriented, but it's a group of people working with stuff as you cross borders, and that's worth following to see some of their outcomes. I had the opportunity to participate in that, and I'm on one of their working groups, where we're talking about things like this. The other area that's very interesting that goes towards the technical stuff that Paige and Arif were talking about, I put it into the chat, but for the video, there's a group called WhatWG that's looking at like what is a domain and what are the parameters of URI, and there's a difference between a URL and a URI. A URI includes the whole HTTP : or HTTPS : / it might be FTP, or I think Zoom, there's things for chat and phone calls and other things that activate before you even get to the name. They're working on like how those are structured and what are the actions that are taken for things like that, and how do they behave. So, I mean, we can get way out into that. The majority of the browsers that are out there right now are based on a common library called Chromium, and I'd have to dig a little bit. If we want to go into developers kind of call and look at like, what does all that look like? I can take us down that rabbit hole too. If there are people who are really technical and want to go into, how do the browsers work with URLs, we can go down there. That's a narrower group of people typically want to look at that, but we certainly can.
Well, maybe we'll save that for another Tuesday or something, or
not. Yeah. I mean, it may just be narrow.
This stuff is really, like, for me, it's really interesting. Like, I'm not technical on that end at all. I'm not involved. I'd like to get more involved with ICANN and all that kind of stuff, but it's just, you operate a registrar, right? So you know a lot more about this stuff, and it's cool that you share it. Like, I'm really, I think I speak for a lot of us that we're really appreciative. And same thing with Stephen with his legal stuff. He pops up when we say his name 3 times. It's like, it's cool to have people here who share their knowledge of things that really matter to this industry that most of us just don't, go over our head. We don't realize it's there, but the domains, there's so much stuff working to make them work properly and give us our abilities to do what we do as domainers that we sometimes overlook. There's a lot more to it than just go to GoDaddy and pay her $8 or $9, or not just GoDaddy but anywhere else, and so
some people like the sausage factory floor and seeing how everything's built. Some people just like the sausages, right?
Just to comment on what Arav said, I was looking on LinkedIn